Welcome to the Machines and Molecules podcast. Machines and Molecules hosts guests that have backgrounds in biotechnology, biochemistry, machine learning, and entrepreneurship. I'm Ingmar Schuster, your host, and our guest today is Laura Möller, with whom we'll talk about the ecosystem of entrepreneurship, VC world, accelerators, and many other things. Laura was an investor at Burda Principal Investments and IBB Ventures. Hi, Laura. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm super. Thank you.
So recently you've become the director at KIEZ, which is an accelerator based out of Berlin. Maybe can you explain what KIEZ's primary mission is?
Absolutely. It's basically what it stands for. It means Künstliche, Intelligenz, Entrepreneurship Zentrum, which translates into Artificial Intelligence Entrepreneurship Center. It's an initiative that's going back to the three large universities in Berlin and the Charité, and we're mainly here to support scientists, alumni, and the graduates of the large Berlin universities to basically kickstart their entrepreneurship journey, to allow them to get more of the very valuable research work that is also related with the real world into a startup, and hence help them in having a large impact on society through that kind of means.
Okay. And what types of startups should consider applying to the accelerator? What do you offer them at KIEZ?
Yeah, so it's mainly catered towards startups that use AI at their core, that basically utilize the developments that have been going on for decades, actually, in artificial intelligence, but definitely have been kind of accelerated with the emergence of generative AI, also have been understood in the broader society as a value driver in science, but also in business going forward in a much more disruptive way, so that we're basically trying to be the platform for these types of founders that are working at the intersection between artificial intelligence and a specific domain such as biotech, such as your company, but also with regards to productivity, with regards to educational purposes, and so on and so forth, to get the most out of the scientific findings that they had, either through their doctorate or through other types of work that they've done in research or during their studies. And this is basically what we're trying to get out of the universities. I mean, a lot of people know that German research institutions hold all of this potential in engineering, in biotech, in health, in broad fields of science, basically. But we are not necessarily seeing the translation into the business world, and also startups out of the science-backed context have a bit of a hard time to really get off the ground.
And how are you trying to help these startups to get off the ground and to fill that gap that currently exists?
Yeah. So when we initially started, we had more kind of a set curricula where we thought like all of these kind of items are very helpful for founders, and that they should basically go through all of these things one by one, and then they know it all, and then we can let them go into the world of the startups. But the reality is that, especially within the field of AI and Gen AI, we see even a higher pace of iteration compared to your standard startup, if there is such thing. So what we concluded out of this is that we need to have a very individualized offering. There are a few things that we basically offer to everyone, and we also want everyone to attend, which is around ethics and AI, for example. But then there are lots of things that are emergent, that are important for 1 week or for 2 weeks, and that need to be solved very quickly. And then we move on and on and on. And we are doing this by for one, making our network more accessible, and basically expanding the work that we've done as a team. And each of us has been in this kind of ecosystem for a long time with a bit of a different kind of scope. For me, it's been the VC world. For others, it's been the world of the of grants for researchers, and so on and so forth. And in combination with just trying to be as helpful as we can. And then on top of that, we're bringing in mentors that have specific knowledge within the fields that are experts themselves, because in a complex world such as ours these days, and also working with complex kind of startup ideas that really can leave a difference, but in itself are harder to solve, we need to provide that kind of guidance, how to find the right people within the ecosystem fast to solve these issues fast and move on then to the next kind of challenge.
Mm-hmm. So this is all very individualized. Do you also currently have some general initiatives that you drive forward at KIEZ? Or maybe related question, is there a long-term vision of where you want to see KIEZ develop?
Yeah. So for KIEZ, I think we've done the first kind of stage. We've accumulated kind of a lot of learnings. We've worked with a total of 70 plus companies, or 70. And from these learnings, we can basically draw our own conclusions on how to deliver the service in the best way possible. And this is something that we see, where we see also a pull from other regions. For example, the other strong university institutions like the Karlsruhe Institute for Technology, the RWTH Aachen, which I think RWTH Aachen translates a bit weirdly into English, who are all very well known for their, for example, engineering capabilities, similar to what the Charité with health does in Berlin. And we're trying to, at the next stage, to bring these kind of different communities closer together and ensure that we can go deeper on the very specific domain knowledge and build kind of clusters around the things that will also be able, where we will be able in Germany to leverage the potential that we already have with regards to the industry knowledge and the data and all of the relevance that we have here and the systems that are in place, but then supercharged by making AI more accessible and to create more of these kind of interdisciplinary teams and to help foster that ecosystem in a better manner.
Are there very typical things that science-based startups have to struggle with? Because I have some ideas myself. I would be very interested in what you see looking over several startups at a time.
Yeah. I think sometimes we do have the problem that there is a solution, and actually kind of like a really edgy, very good solution to something that is not yet or maybe never solving a real problem. And this kind of exploration and finding where really is the business case? How can you make something out of that idea, of that solution, of that technology that really sticks with people and that is serving an urgent need or relieving a pain once you can figure that out in a good way, and translating that also into how the system works and where you need to start to transform that system. Because startups oftentimes tell like we'll be disrupting this and that industry, but if you're not necessarily understanding the inner functions of how an industry works in the first place, it's usually harder, especially when considering deep tech, to really have kind of to leapfrog that kind of industry forward.
Yeah, I also have the impression that communication oftentimes is a big thing, especially for people who used to be scientists and they are used to communicating in a scientific way, which includes a lot of ifs and buts. And if that happens, then this happens. And that seems to me to be a very problematic language to use when building a startup.
Yeah, especially given the fact that as a startup, you don't necessarily should have the final solution in your mind before you go out and start speaking with your ecosystem, like the inner circle, with other researchers or other people that are from the business side working within that industry, or investors or other founders and so on and so forth. And researchers tend to have the kind of they just learned for a long time that they better go out and present like the full picture when speaking to people outside of their community. I think within the community, there's a lot of exchange, and also science is working like this. So it's not necessarily that there's no openness of exchanging. And I think the whole like ivory tower analogy is not necessarily true anymore in science these days. But to really go out of the comfort zone and to speak with people that are not within their inner circle is a bit more challenging for founders with the scientific or academia background. This is for sure. This is something that we're trying to help our founders to get more comfortable with, and to understand the benefits of having this kind of input as a and to mean in helping them to iterate faster.
Yeah, understand. What would you say is the best help in terms of securing funding to startups once they went through KIEZ? Because this is the bottleneck for most startups to continue to have shots at goal so that they can make revenue and at some point live off the revenue and of what clients actually pay for their services. But to get there, oftentimes there's funding needed. How do you help startups to secure that?
Yeah. It's in the end still very much a people's business, meaning that you need to create these kind of opportunities to meet people, to mingle, to chat, to build a relationship during a time where you're not necessarily in need of funding, where you're still are able to get feedback and to get some kind of ideas and concepts and tinker around with them and think about how this could be relevant for your specific startup, your business idea. But from there, we need to basically enable that. And this is not necessarily a network that someone that is coming from science has, or it's also something that is a bit harder for women to tap into because they don't naturally have these kind of networks. And this is something where we see our role as a platform, as an accelerator, to actually really be super crucial. And there we are also, I think we're starting to do a bit of a better job, also given my background that I'm bringing into KIEZ, but there is still a lot of things that we can do. And when we're thinking about how to develop KIEZ forward, it's always with the goal in mind, how can we make our startups more successful? And we take funding, for example, as a proxy for this kind of success, because then we can, or we do feel a bit more comfortable if startups utilize capital as a catalyst to get to to achieve their goals in a faster manner. And this kind of fostering that network and helping with this exchange also means that we need to prepare our founders in a way to understand the language that VCs speak, because it's usually very different to what you usually are speaking about when you're considering like how do we need to think about enzymes and so on and so forth. So it's a very different kind of topic, but for some, like literal rocket science, this then sounds like rocket science to me, and it's so different worlds, and we're trying to build these bridges and to increase the understanding, but it's not really that complex. I mean, venture capital is a very simple business model, and just helping founders to understand how it works, and what the incentives are, and what kind of, and why certain things are really important, like the potential market needs to be super big, because otherwise the fund metrics, the fund mathematics do not pan out. This is something that we for sure can provide. And this is also something where I found out that I'm kind of enjoying this now that I'm not within VC anymore, that I can speak very openly about also the kind of dark side of VC, what it means if you're not one of the winners, and so on and so forth, and preparing teams in a better way. This is definitely something that I have on my agenda in helping the teams to understand what they're getting themselves into. Because it's not all sunshine, especially if things are not going according to plan, and this not going according to plan actually is the majority that will basically be happening. This is just mathematics at the end. And to make sure that in the first place you select the partners that you're planning to work with in a very good way, what to look out for, how to also assess VCs on the other side, but at the same time to understand the opportunity cost if you're not taking in money, if you're going for bootstrapping the company, what could happen? A competitor basically overruns you, is much faster and delivering on the goals that you actually were so energized and energetic about getting yourself to solve for broader society. So this is kind of what we're trying to offer here.
Yeah. You mentioned it. You come out of the VC world. You left it now. You actually came into something that was born out of European bureaucracy, if we want to formulate it in a negative way. I think what Germany, Europe is good at oftentimes is doing is setting up government programs to help advance something. Apart from government programs, do you see other ways how we could speed up the startup building in this economy in the EU?
Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily speeding up. The thing that I'm most excited about basically changing going forward is probably more the long-term approach. But I think in general, we need as academia, but also as society, think differently about entrepreneurship. In a way that during the studies of each and every student, we need to have more of that kind of entrepreneurial understanding. What does it mean to think about a business model, or even what does it mean if I have a small project, if I, for whatever kind of purpose, this kind of entrepreneurship thinking needs to be fostered in a much better way. And the other thing that I guess we need is that academia needs to understand that entrepreneurship also is a successful kind of way forward. It's not necessarily publishing the next 5 papers only and to have it then sit somewhere in a drawer and not really not really being useful or even being used somewhere else in some other people or startups, companies work. And having that kind of mindset shift that also professors and researchers start to be more proud of what is the potential impact that a startup out of that research could have. This is something that we need to work much more on and have this kind of mindset change. And it's an iterative process, I believe, and it's also something where policymakers can have an impact because they really do have the ability to set the third mission next to the education and research, that we also have this kind of entrepreneurship mindset in just positioned differently within universities and research organizations. But that also means that we need to change some of the nitty-gritty details. For example, if you're leaving as researchers and you're out to start your companies for a year or 2 years, you will see lots of pushback once you want to go back into academia. It's not that easy to go back, and to level the playing field, to make it easier to basically welcome that kind of knowledge out of the industry, out of the, let's say, real world. I'm putting quotes here because this is obviously a bit of a stretch, but from the kind of business side of the equation, to get that feedback back into research that then also can help to create kind of a positive flywheel on where to focus on and why to focus on which kind of topics, that can then also translate from the ground research back into the business world. This is, I think, something that we can do much better, and where we also have examples in other regions of the world where this works already in a better manner, and where if you want to, I'm a business person. I've worked in VC, and I'm obviously thinking also about returns of investments, and we're spending billions just in tiny Berlin on research and universities, and to not have that kind of RI that then translates also back into societal gains, for example, with regards to health and biotech. This is not something that I think from a societal level that is really what we would want to invest our money in.
I'll put out a thesis here, which I copy in part, at least. I copy the quote. I think it was from Michael Jackson, this VC, not the pop star, that's dead, but the VC influencer on LinkedIn, who I think posted once about American pension funds owning, through the VCs that they give their money to, owning, I think, 10% of German unicorns, whereas German pension funds own 1%.
Yeah.
Is that also a problem that basically Europe is not pouring a lot of money into this? So Europe is not really investing into innovation?
Yeah. So, I mean, that comes in stages. 10 years ago, the early stage scene in Germany basically was that there was not really a lot going on. This changed, and now these kind of problems, they keep on being around just for different stages of the funding journey of startups, and also the requirements of startups have changed in the past, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, since we are seeing more and more push in deep tech, where you also need different type of funding. And I think European investors got kind of comfortable with the fact that we were building platforms and marketplaces and SaaS companies, really like digital products that have been, I mean, these years were formative for the European startup ecosystem. And I think we do have a lot of talent, but this talent is now also kind of redirecting their expertise towards deep tech, towards a field where they really see that they can have a prolonged impact. And I think also that the European continent is very much a very good breeding ground for these types of startups, considering the ingenuity that we already have here. And we now need to basically fill this gap. And this gap naturally now gets filled by money that is flowing in from outside of Europe, because we have not basically help our institutions that could invest in these types of funding rounds to understand the potential of it. And this is a groundwork that needs to be done now. It needs actually to be done relatively quickly. But there is already, there's some best practices in place. For example, France, they opened up and they kind of require pension funds and so on and so forth now to also invest a certain amount in this kind of asset class. And this is something that also the German government is currently working towards to enable this in a better way. But in the end, I think these are business decisions, and they need to understand that there is a high potential of return if they do the kind of portfolio mix in a good way. And there is an increased interest, I'd say, to participate in the potential success that the continent, or the potential that the continent holds going forward with regards to deep tech. And I also think that despite the whole geopolitical tensions that we see, this might even be a chance, because there is an opportunity in being a bit more independent and making sure that we can deliver on our own energy demands and so on and so forth. And this, I think, now helps to get the thinking going, and then we need to provide the kind of environment where this also fits well. And this is something that I'm kind of in constant exchange with VCs that I now see getting more interested in deep tech, but they also now need to learn and understand, like, what are the right kind of criteria to select a company in deep tech that maybe in 10 years from now will make their first revenues. But until then, it functions very differently, because then there are like forward-looking contracts where someone basically already invests and then gets the hold of the first kind of production results and so on and so forth. I mean, there are new kinds of constellations that have been around for a while, but we now need to translate into the VC world to be then recognized as a proof point for these companies going forward.
Yes. Yeah, I have the impression, exactly as you say, that right now many European VCs are eyeing towards a speed of returns that is very hard to realize in what's called deep tech companies. And for the people that do not know about this terminology, this basically means, for example, science-based startups that do stuff that is very hard to do technically, that not only has the economic risk that's always inherent to a company, but where there's also some technical risk, because what you're trying to do is really hard, with the upside, the potential upside of when you actually manage to do it, then also the returns are much higher.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned France and that they require their pension funds to pour more money in. So I kind of hearing your answer to my question as yes, there needs to be more money in the system so that these kinds of startups also get financed, and so that higher risk types of startups get the money they need in order to really innovate also on a technological level and not only in terms of a business model, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe we can look at it from two sides. One is obviously that we need to make sure that these companies are also understanding the potential that they're having, that they're owning that potential, and that they're very much ambitious to make the returns profile work then for such a large fund. If you consider, like, I don't know, you have 100 billion under management, and these are the big type of funds that you then need to have around finance that requires 300, 500 million investment in a very early stage where there is not yet a clear path to, there should be a clear path to revenue, but there is no proof so far, because these kind of, I don't know, these folks, the first of its kind, things for the production, for example, they are not yet in place. So there's still a lot of risk. And if you want to make it work for these types of investors, also the founders need to be very ambitious, and they need to make sure that they have something that basically can serve a market that is super large. So this is something where we also, I think, can support in a certain way early on to make sure that this mindset of founders is going into the right direction. On the other side, obviously, we would want not just international investors to come here and to basically invest in these startups, but what we do have here is a very strong Mittelstand with super rich families that basically can invest very significantly, not just with their wealth into these types of startups, but also their network. They're probably much better connected to Asia, where you can acquire resources that you need for your production, so on and so forth. So there's actually kind of a natural fit, but there is still too much of a a wall between those two sides, and we need to tear that down to make sure that the understanding, the awareness, and also the understanding for the potential is much better understood. And pensions fund aside, I think the strong or the more potential with regards to Germany or Europe in a broader sense is actually within these kinds of family offices, family run, very successful businesses, hidden champions that are the world's largest producer of a special type of screws, making billions and billions of revenue, having a very knowledgeable management, but also very knowledgeable people on the floor that are actually in production and so on. And these are the kind of capabilities, the expertise that we also need to now help to get access towards the deep tech startup founders.
So to shift gears a bit, we talked a lot about everything that we think is necessary to push the startup ecosystem, to push science-based startups. Now for something completely different. The theme of the show is machines, molecules, and a third M word. Have you thought of a third M word that you brought for us today?
I absolutely did. And I do have 4, but I will just go with one. That basically is Mondays, which maybe sounds odd, but given that I have the opportunity to work on such this is a great task that I'm allowed to work on and to help facilitate great new startups going forward. And since I'm able to do that, I'm actually always very happy that there is a Monday morning that I can start working towards these goals step by step.
That sounds like you did a good career move then. Okay, is there... what would you say is the most important part of what changes the motivation for you now? Is it more that you're outside of the necessities of economics of a VC and that you can act in a freer way, or what would you say?
It's actually the opportunity to not be just confronted with what just naturally happens, but with to be able to go as deep as into the education, like into universities, and foster that entrepreneurship side of things, and enabling people at the right kind of stage, and making sure that the upper funnel of what can turn into great startups is actually filled with all the potential, not just those that maybe come from an entrepreneurial family, that were lucky enough to have a professor along the way where she supported them in a very good way, and kind of put more emphasis on the potential that there could be. I don't want it to be so coincidentally anymore in the future. I want to make sure that this is a systemic change where we can then reap the benefits eventually, and ensuring that we can build the next kind of Mittelstand going forward, even though the dynamics of VC obviously work a bit different than building a Mittelstand, but there will there will always be the founders that decide to take a different approach, and this is also super fine. But obviously, we would want to see the potential unfold, especially in those areas critical to society in the coming decades. 10 years probably from now, to get that going much faster. And I see that VC investment, for example, can be a catalyst here. But if we have this entrepreneurship education in a more general way in the early days, and actually we should go into schools to deliver that, not into universities, because it may be already too late when you choose your path during university. But I think that this is actually what we need to do to pick up speed in Europe and to get back on track, to be relevant in that kind of changing that environment in the future.
Yes, that sounds like a very good idea as a mission, what you just portrayed. I also have the impression that making the funnel bigger of actually good founders that just don't happen to know the right people, being able to found companies, and ones that have a big technological impact on the society.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Laura, for being our guest today. It was very enjoyable talking to you, and see you at the campus.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the great preparation, and also you're pushing forward with Exozyme on all of the things that I explained.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.